back to Autism at Home, brought to you by us at Early Autism Project Malaysia through our non-profit initiative, The Hope Project. My name is Jochebed Isaacs, and it's so nice to see you again. Welcome back to our series on building tolerance. In the previous lessons, we introduced the general guideline for building tolerance. Then we talked about building tolerance to hair cutting and then nail clipping. In this lesson, we will be talking about managing separation anxiety through a program called I'll Be Back. Now, when we tell our children, I'll be back, what do we actually mean? How will our children know how long they would have to wait anxiously before we come back to them? To a child on the spectrum, actually to many young children as well, a parent leaving the room or separating from their child can be very difficult. When are they coming back? Are they coming back? And so what we want to do is to teach children to be able to tolerate their parents or carers leaving the room for very short durations of time initially, and then gradually increasing the time. We want to teach our children the concept of I'll be back. The program essentially looks a little like this. An adult says to the child, I'll be back. The adult dashes out of the room, and initially we can use a timer to indicate when the adult comes back. The minute the timer beeps, the adult comes rushing back in the door and says, I'm back, preferably with a big reinforcer. Some relevant prerequisites to learn this skill are basic cooperation, some compliance with the first then instructions, understanding of some of the visuals, and hopefully the ability to wait. For the materials, you will need a social story titled I'll Be Back and a timer. A video model may also help communicate expectations much more clearly. The first then board will also be handy. And of course, the rewards. You may also need to have some fun activities that your child can engage in independently while they wait for you. This is especially important as the duration increases. Now, before starting the program, it is important to assess your child's separation anxiety from everyone at home. Who are they most anxious to be separated from? Then, check how long they can wait patiently before starting to look for that main person. This information is critical to help with breaking down those program targets and expectations. The breakdown may be different from the ones done for haircutting and nail clipping, as this lesson focuses on building tolerance to cope with a loved one being away from your child, as opposed to getting your child familiar with items by exposing them to those items. So let's break it down. As usual, step 1 is to communicate expectations. Read the social story, then watch a video model. The main point is for your child to be exposed to the phrase, I'll be back, and to learn what happens next. The adult leaves the room. After a few moments, the adult comes back saying, I'm back. Then step 2 is to probe. We begin straight away by modeling. After reading the social story, choose someone your child does not have maybe any separation anxiety to. That person, oftentimes maybe a teacher or even a therapist, will say loudly, I'll be back, then set the timer and leave the room. We typically start really short, like even just 5 or 10 seconds. The therapist barely has time to close the door before the timer rings and they bounce back in with reinforcement stating, I'm back. If a child is very young and still learning how to focus and attend, the child may not even notice that the other adult left the room. So the whole point is basically just to expose your child to that concept of I'll be back and to build that tolerance. Then you want to move to the next step, step 3, which is the practice step. We will begin with preferably again an adult that the child is least upset to leave the room. Again, start with the use of a timer for a very short duration. Every exit comes with the instruction, I'll be back, and every return comes with, I'm back. To ensure your child's safety, you need to ensure someone else is in the room with your child. Try your best to ensure that your child can't see you and you have actually so-called left the room. When the timer goes off, immediately return back to your child. Remember to say, I'm back, and present the reward. Gradually increase the duration of time that a parent is staying out of your child's sight. We build up by 30 seconds, then we increase it by minutes, then we increase it by even 5 minutes at a time. Typically, once it is more than a couple of minutes, it is best to give your child a toy or activity to occupy themselves while waiting for you to return. Then comes step 4, the big day, which would usually be when your child is actually dropped off, either at their therapy center or school or daycare. Remember to follow the same steps of communicating expectations, this time even more specifically, maybe with a visual on their schedule that you will be back at the end of the day. Use the term, "I'll be back," which hopefully has a strong association already. And then remember that your child needs to be occupied sufficiently while their parents are away. Upon returning, give a big reward while saying, "I'm back." We then move on to step 5, which is the review and possibly generalization. If the practices have been going well, then start to move on to the generalization step. Repeat step 3's breakdown and plan, but with different people and maybe in different places. By this time, your child is hopefully quite confident that the adult or their parent will return back. Some of you may be wondering though, what about when you need to leave for work or drop them off at play school? Well, the answer would be using that visual. In the same way you'd be able to say verbally to your child who has that level of understanding, "I'll be back home after work about maybe 6 p.m. You want to put that on the visual schedule at home and say, "I'll be back," while pointing at the visual schedule and repeating what will occur first before you are back home. The "I'll be back" routine can be done in this order. First, read the "I'll be back" social story and preferably show a first end card. First, "I'll be back," child waits, then reward. Show the video model, say the instructions "I'll be back," then leave the room and start the timer. When the timer goes off, return to the room and say "I'm back." Present the reward immediately.
Pop quiz. Mary's mom tried practicing the "I'll be back" program with Mary, but the minute she said "I'll be back," Mary started screaming and holding on to her mother's leg, refusing to let her go. Mary's mom is upset that this program is not working. What do you think Mary's mom could do? Show Mary a video model of what is expected, that her mom will say "I'll be back," and when the timer rings, she will come back right away. Practice with Mary with a different adult, not her mother, so she can build a tolerance to a person who is less difficult to separate from. Review previous cooperation and flexibility programs like First Then. Shorten the duration to even 2 to 3 seconds and to pair with a very strong reward. Well, the answer is not just A or B, C or D, but all of the above are excellent troubleshooting ideas to help learn to tolerate. Remember, if your child is still very upset or protesting, they're not ready for the next step and instead need you to backtrack and break it down further.
Your turn. Is separating from your child difficult? If so, how could you implement this successfully? What reward would you use? How short a time would you start? And who would you start practicing with? Go ahead and brainstorm and practice this skill. Begin teaching. And there you have it. Hopefully the guidelines will help your child build a tolerance to separating from their parents or loved one. Some parents may need this for themselves to build a tolerance to separate from your children. One final closing tip that is very important. No matter how tempting it is to sneak out when your child is not looking, this can actually cause a greater sense of insecurity, and some children then refuse to let their parents out of their sight. No matter how much protesting your child makes, it is always valuable to communicate clearly in a way that he or she understands. Well, in the next lesson, we will be talking about building tolerance to loud sounds, so stay tuned. And if you haven't already, do check out our free online resource platform, Autism at Home, which has all the corresponding articles and downloadables for you. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Follow us on Instagram and Facebook to stay updated. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you very soon.